Bill Potts is a 5-time cancer survivor. He is turning his cancer pain into purpose and has written a book to help others in their cancer journey so others can learn from his mistakes. He provides practical advice on managing the journey for patients and their families. Bill, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story.
Andrea, thank you. And thank you for what you do for the cancer community. You do
Thank you
great
so
work.
much. 5 times. Wow. Can you
Mhm.
take us back
Yeah.
to the very, very, very beginning? When was that? How did it start?
Yeah, great question. 2002, I went to my primary care physician. He looked at me and said, "There's something on your thyroid. We need to get it checked." So we did. That turned out to be cancer number one, which was thyroid cancer. Got radiation treatment, the same radiation you get from Chernobyl. So that one lit me up pretty good. And they actually recommended about 6 months later, this local oncologist I was working with recommended I get treatment again. And that's kind of when I put the brakes on and moved to MD Anderson because that didn't add up. And so we avoided second treatment. And then in 2008, I went in after a trip to Europe. I went to the doctor for a lump below my right ear, had that biopsied, and that turned out to be lymphoma number one. And then lymphoma number two was 2014, lymphoma number three 2019, lymphoma number four, and prostate cancer 2020. So I've had six different cancers, 5 times surviving the prostate cancer. We're kind of sitting and
Oh
waiting
my
on.
goodness. Okay, we got to back up. We got to back up. So let's go back to the beginning. 20 years ago, the thyroid cancer. I actually had Graves'
Mm-hmm.
disease. So I have had that
Mm.
oh so fun radiation. It's actually, I believe it's the exact same
Mm.
radiation. And
Yes.
but I had a goiter the size of a tennis ball. Now I was in my
Mm.
early 20s and I thought my neck was just getting fat. Truly, that's what I thought. Did you notice anything on your
Mm.
neck? Did you have any symptoms at all?
No symptoms. Didn't notice anything. The keen eye of the PCP really identified it. So just went in for those checkups that my wife makes me go in for occasionally. And yeah, he saw it. It was
Wow.
impressive.
And I'm curious just because I know the radiation you had. Did they tell you that you couldn't be around children or other people for 3 or 4 days?
Yeah, it was frustrating. I was in the hospital for 2 or 3 days, and I got the Geiger counter to see if I could leave. And finally, it was not beeping enough where I could go. Yeah, it was a little bit of a challenge. I had 3 young kids, and I had to go watch their ball games. I actually stayed away from them for a week or two just to be extra careful because they were little. And so, yeah, it was a challenging time. I don't know how you were, but I lost my sense of taste from that treatment. And so
Permanently?
anyway,
You lost your
it
sense of
was no, I lost it for maybe a couple weeks and then it came back.
I don't remember losing my sense of taste, but maybe because I didn't have health insurance, they didn't put me in the hospital. They sent me
Oh
home.
yeah, I was
They
isolated.
sent me home and
Oh
said, "Don't
wow.
leave your apartment for 72 hours." That's what they told me.
Okay. Yeah, I would have rather been at home, but I was in this corner of this hospital that they wouldn't even come in. They would slide the food underneath the door. It was interesting. When I left, they threw
Right.
away everything, anything I'd worn, anything
Because
I'd
they say it
touched.
can
It
come
was
out through your
crazy.
sweat, the radiation. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Crazy.
Yes. Yeah.
So 6 months later, why did they want to do radiation again? And you said you went to MD Anderson. So where were you going before? Kind of walk me through that.
Yeah, yeah. So I was living in
Okay.
Houston at the time. Did a follow-up scan at the 6 months, a little after 6 months, and they noticed something on the scan, and they're like, "We think you have your thyroid cancer back." And I'm like, "That's impossible because I don't have a
Exactly.
thyroid, and I went through this radiation." And so they're like, "Yeah, we think you need to do some more treatment." And I'm like, "Just not adding up." So MD Anderson is in Houston, so leveraged some relationships I had and got in there pretty quickly. And they're like, "No, you don't have thyroid cancer back, so don't worry about it. We'll adjust your medications and we'll handle you." So yeah, it was kind of the eye opening. I kind of the first the first real big issue I had, which made me realize that I have to own my own cancer journey. I just can't be listening to what
Yeah.
everybody's telling me. In particular, in that case,
Yeah.
those
Oh
doctors.
gosh, I agree 100%. So do you have any idea what they thought they saw in the scan?
I mean, I looked at the scan. It was a little dot. I mean, it definitely was not cancer, and it was so small as to be ridiculously small. So it felt like a play for treatment when I didn't need it, a for-profit,
Oh
local
my gosh,
oncologist.
really? Oh God, that's terrible. I'm so
Mm.
sorry. So you get through that. Now are you going to MD Anderson in terms of just routine cancer follow-up, that sort of thing? Is that your go-to?
Was my go-to for the thyroid. So then they start managing my medications and things like that. But then they kind of moved me out. I was basically cured at that point and wound up moving to St. Petersburg, Florida, which is where we live
Okay.
now. And so it was in 2008. I'd come back from Europe from a business trip, and I noticed this lump below my ear, and I went to my PCP here, and then he sent me to a ENT guy, and they said it's probably no big deal. We'll just take it out and see. And so he did, and I went back to get the staples out, and he reads. You can't make this up. He reads the biopsy report, but wasn't listening. So it says, lymphoma, blah 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 blah. And I said, can you back it up, and can, can you please tell me what it is that you just said? I didn't know anything about lymphoma, so he basically threw me out and gave me it said I don't do cancer, and so I immediately called MD Anderson and said, hey, can you guys see me? And they're like, yeah, send the pathology reports. And within probably a week or two, I was down in Houston, and I got staged and went through that whole process. And they owned my lymphoma till COVID, and I couldn't get down to MD Anderson, and that's why now I go to Mayo.
Okay, so do you think that ENT was reading the report for the first time in front of you?
He was not only reading it for the first time, he wasn't listening to what he was reading. It was actually a
Oh
disaster.
God. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm so glad that I'm not glad you'd had the experience, but I'm glad that you had the wherewithal to go, oh, okay, this is not, it's good. And that you knew that you needed a specialist and that you were able to go to MD Anderson again and had the means, the financial means to do so. What type of lymphoma was it?
Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. In my particular version, it is not curable, so it just keeps coming back. So you just knock it down, and then just keep knocking it down when it comes back.
What type of treatment did you do that first time you were diagnosed?
Well, it's an interesting story. So they prescribed R-CHOP for me after I got staged, and I turned
Now,
it
for
down.
people who don't know, what
And I
is
said,
that?
I did. Oh, it's a standard treatment, Rituxan and a whole bunch of other ones that it causes you to lose your hair and make you. It's a brutal regimen. It's standard for
A
lymphomas
chemo
back
combination?
then. Yeah, chemo combination, chemo cocktail, and I asked them. I knew I would lose my hair, and was in sales and traveling at the time, and it's a great story. But I asked the team, and it was a team. I said, no, I'm not going to do this. And they're like, why? And I told them why, and didn't want to lose my hair. Interesting. But they're like, I said, you're MD Anderson, surely. And with a smile, you can come up with a different plan. And they said, okay. So 2 hours later, I almost missed my flight back here. But 2 hours later, they met with me and they said, look, this is 2008. Remember, they said, there's this thing called immunotherapy. You probably haven't heard of it. I'm like, I have not heard of it. Nobody had really till
Right.
2009. And so they're like, we can try this, which is basically the R of R-CHOP, Rituxan or rituximab, a Genentech product, and Leukine, which is a largely used for leukemia. It was Bayer, now it's Teva, but it's a drug that boosts your immune system, the white blood cells in particular. And they said, let's give it a try, and if it works, it works. If not, we'll do R-CHOP. Well, it
Mhm.
worked, and it worked until 2014. And so my cancer didn't come back for 5 years, which is
Okay,
amazing.
so you do immunotherapy before anyone's really done immunotherapy and
Hmm.
works for 5 years. Did you
Hmm.
think, even though they told you this was a type of lymphoma that would come back, did you think when you were getting close to that 5 year mark, did you think you were going to be in the clear?
No,
Really? You didn't?
no, yeah, no, I knew it was coming back.
Really?
They were pretty, yeah, they were pretty
So
clear.
they
So, they were thrilled I got
so
five
they set
years.
that expectation up. Were
Hmm.
you going to MD Anderson every couple of months, once a year for scans? How was that working out?
Hmm. Yeah, I was at that point, I was once a year. In this particular case, when it came back in 2014, I called them to tell them because it was in between, it was before the year and that particular time. And so I said, look, it's back. And, I need to come in and just confirm it because you just kind of know. First of all, I could see it. It was below my hip, so I could see the tumor. I'm pretty thin, and they're like, okay. And so
You
I
could
went back
see
and
it?
yeah, I could see
How
it.
big
Yeah,
was it at
yeah.
that point?
So, oh, it was probably the size of a walnut, but I am pretty thin, so it just happened to be sitting in a spot where I could see it through the skin. So, yeah, so they did a biopsy and said, yeah, you're right, and let's do it again. So we went back through the same immunotherapy minus the leukine because that proven not to really make a big difference, and so I just stuck with the Rituxan.
And did that work?
It worked. Yeah, it worked well. So 2008, 2014, then I get to 2019, and it came back again. And so same thing.
So
Called
where
them
did
and
it come
told
back
them.
that time?
We went. It came back. It came back in different places. That one was picked up. It came up in my throat. So that one I actually missed. I could feel it in my throat. I could tell I was having a little difficulty swallowing, but I went on my 1 year scan, and they're like, you have something in your throat. I'm like, I was wondering what that was, and they're like, yeah. So had that taken out. Yeah, and we went through the thing again.
So, since it didn't occur to you that it was the lymphoma coming back, what did you think it was? Did you think you were having something issues with your esophagus? I mean, what did you think it was that you were having these?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Allergies. I didn't know. I was just like, it wasn't that hard to swallow. I just thought, geez, and it wasn't dramatic enough for me to pick up the phone and call. And I'm pretty aware of my body, so having missed that one was a little bit concerning. But I didn't miss the next one. Actually, my wife caught the next one, 2020. I got out of the shower, and she's like, "Look," and I look, same. It's there it was, and so she could see it. Now it's back in my groin area, and I'm like, "Okay, we'll go back to MD Anderson." And MD Anderson says, "Yeah, no, you can't come back because you'll have to be here for 2 weeks before we let you in the
Oh,
door."
COVID, right.
This
Got
is
it.
right July of 2020. So there's a Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville,
Right.
Florida, 4 hours away. So called up, got me right in,
S-
and they took that thing out and
So each
biopsied
so
it.
each time they are removing the tumor and then following
Hmm.
up with immunotherapy.
Uh, uh, for the lymphoma, they are removing the tumor, except for one of the times they did a needle biopsy. The one in my groin that you could see, they did the needle biopsy, so they didn't need to go take it all the way out. But when it came back, at Mayo, they took the whole thing out. So yeah, but it's not just immunotherapy. So my last set was chemotherapy plus immunotherapy at Mayo because they have to cut the cancer smartens up, so they have to kind of get more aggressive on the treatment, and they were super aggressive. So I got a new version of Rituxan. It's called Gazyva, and I got a drug called Bendeca, and it's hardcore.
Let's back up. I want to dig deeper into this most recent time, but can you tell people what some of the side effects of the immunotherapy are when you just had the single agent drug of the immunotherapy?
Yeah, it's a little bit deceptive because you hear immunotherapy and you don't think there's going to be side effects, but there
Yeah.
are. And so the first side effect I had was I had a reaction to the Rituxan in my first treatment about an hour in,
An
and
hour
it was,
in?
hour in. Yeah,
How?
they kind of drip it in slowly the first treatment just in case you're going to have a reaction. And I'm alarmed up, and I'm in a private room with plenty of attention because they're monitoring for a reaction, and they turned it up, and then I had a reaction, and it was pretty ugly. So
What was the reaction?
it was pretty bad. It went in anaphylaxis, so it was, difficulty breathing, couldn't, your eyes swell shut, your heart rate goes through the
Oh
roof,
my
and they inject you
gosh.
with they inject you straight into the IV and get you breathing and well, and yeah, it's pretty quick.
Mm.
They're amazing. I've had a reaction. I've had a reaction a couple times, but that was by far the worst.
And what are some other side effects that are maybe more common?
Yes, yeah. So the once you get through that, then they start managing on the treatments. They manage the side effects. But I was having with the Rituxan, fatigue was the biggest issue. Often on skin issues. I didn't have too much nausea just with the Rituxan. I managed that pretty well. It wasn't terrible. Fatigue being the big one. You also have, I call it chemo brain, which is true. It's physiologically true. Some of the issues with thinking and things like that. Nothing dramatic, but just a little bit slow.
And this last time that it came back, this is the fourth time the lymphomas come back.
Correct.
And during COVID, and now you're being treated at the Mayo Clinic. And now you've had this combination of immunotherapy with chemotherapy.
Correct.
What was that like?
Yeah, it was brutal. So it took the side effects up dramatically. So not only weight gain, chemo brain, dramatic skin issues, smell, just fatigue, nausea, constipation. It just the list just kept going on and on. But the good side effect was my sense of smell this time was enhanced.
Really? I have never heard of
Boy,
that.
I could tell when the neighbors 5 doors down what they're having for breakfast. It was like a dog smell. So much so, I called the plumbers over. This is during COVID, so I had to be very careful, right?
Right.
And I called the plumbers over. I'm like, the bathroom that I use that's by the office I'm in right now in the house, there's a smell, and I can't take it. I'm going to throw up. And so I had 2 plumbers come over, and they're like, it doesn't smell. I'm like, guys, I literally can't even stand here and have this conversation with you. I called my daughter over. She lives nearby. She came over. She goes, Dad, it doesn't smell. I'm like, guys, but it does. It smells to me. So they put some chemical in the drain, and the smell went away.
Did they ever find out what it was? That's what I was waiting for you to tell me, like what the heck it was.
No, they just poured a bunch of chemicals, and the smell went away. I'm like, oh, thank
So,
goodness.
if you don't mind, I want to ask about your children because when this first started, they were quite young. So they have grown up knowing that you have a cancer that comes back, that returns.
Hmm.
What has that been like for them? And how old are they now?
Yeah, so it's a great question. My twins just turned 25, twin girls, and my son's
Twins?
28.
Oh,
Yeah, it's the best. Remarkable. So yeah, it's been. They actually write about it in the book, which is really interesting because it actually was a good perspective for me to hear, because
yeah,
it's true that all they remember is their dad having cancer.
right.
So the twins were 3, and my son was 5 or 6 when I was diagnosed with the thyroid cancer. So they've been through this journey with me. I don't think they really clued in on it until 2019, and then probably not really clued in until 2020. We didn't talk about it a lot, and I lived life normally. Yeah, Dad would go away and go get the stuff, and he would handle it, but he didn't talk too much about it. But 19 and 20 really kind of woke them up, and I got to see that when they wrote about it in the book. Um, Kind of eye opener for me, but yeah, they handled it. It's a challenge to grow up with a dad with cancer.
Yeah,
They I think they value my time. They value time with me a lot more,
sure.
and so through that, we're really tight. Our family, we're pretty tight knit, and so
Where do they
it's been a
live?
blessing. I've got one that lives a couple miles from here, one of the twins, and one that lives in the other twins in Boston, and my son moves to Boston in 3 weeks.
I want to ask you about something you just said. You said the 2019, 2020 really sort of brought it into focus for them. I can speculate as to why, but I want to hear from you. Why? Why for them did that? Because they were grown, almost grown. So why then?
Yeah, I think they could see it in me that this, when you get to number 4 and number 5, and at the same time of number 5, I've also got number 6 with the prostate stuff. I think they just recognize the seriousness of it,
Mhm.
and they saw the change in my tone, the change in my wife's tone. Was much more communicative with them about it as they became an adult. And, I'm like, there is a cumulative impact of all the stuff that's being pumped into my body. And there's a cumulative impact of the cancer on my body, guys. So I'm trying to set expectations that, it's going to be a real challenge. And it's not necessarily a slam dunk that I get to beat it. They just saw me kind of waltz through this the first few times, and then when they saw it start to get harder, that mountain just gets harder to climb. It's with age, and it's with the cumulative effect of it all. Not just physically, but also emotionally and mentally. They're starting to see that
Yeah.
much more than when they were running around being busy and not really recognizing the seriousness of it.
And you mentioned prostate cancer. When were you diagnosed with prostate cancer?
Yeah, July of 2020, just right ahead of lymphoma, and yeah, frustrating. But we just kind of put that on hold. It's not serious. It's slow growing. My particular version, so Mayo's taking good care of that, and so we'll just wait and see. That's the process.
Are they just keeping track of your PSA? Is that
Yeah, yeah. I've had the biopsy, and yeah, they keep track of the PSA. So I should just get an apartment in Jacksonville. I'm there so often.
or at least a discount on Airbnb or
Oh,
something?
I know. Mayo has this great hotel that's on campus. It's a
Really?
courtyard Marriott, which is fantastic because you can walk to all your appointments and come back. And Mayo up in Jacksonville, they because I'm coming in town. Same at MD Anderson, they bunch the appointments together. It's perfect to be able to walk back and forth. The same at MD Anderson. There's a hotel across the street too.
That's really nice and definitely more convenient for patients and their
Mm-hmm.
families.
Mm-hmm.
So most cancers aren't genetic, even though people think they are, but most aren't. But given the number of cancers you've had and the different kinds, have you gotten any genetic testing done?
No, I haven't had genetic testing done, but I have a pretty good feel for what happened. So I've talked through this with the doctors. I worked in the Department of Nuclear Medicine when I was in college, and it was pretty loosey goosey on the safety protocol. So it's likely I got radiated there, and so
Really?
yeah, so the
When was
radiation.
this time-wise?
This
Like
was this
80s,
is
90s?
yeah, this is in the 80s. Yeah, so that's the most likely reason I got the thyroid cancer was exposure to radiations, and I yeah, that's legitimately true. I definitely got exposed, and so then the treatment for the for the thyroid cancer is radiation treatment, which is the pill radiation treatment, not the beam radiation, and
Right.
so it's not it's definitely likely that the lymphoma is a result of the radiation treatment that I received for the thyroid. So we'll never know. But the reason we're not dialing in on the genetic piece is we do believe largely that it's environmental,
Okay. Well, I'm
environmental for the thyroid. Yeah,
I'm happy to hear that for your children.
yeah, yeah. They're pretty relaxed with that because I've gone through this with them many times.
What has been your worst moment in all of it?
Yeah, the worst moment really was my first lymphoma treatment, 2008, when I had the reaction because up until then I was kind of naive about the stakes that we were playing for, but that reaction was so severe that it really woke me up to the fact that we're playing for keeps and that it's much more serious than I anticipated. I went to that treatment with my work computer, and I thought I was going to work.
Oh God,
I mean,
Bill.
I was totally naive.
Oh God.
I know. I'm like, what? You're putting me in a hospital bed? I'm like, how am I going to work? Let alone all the medications I was on.
Was your wife there when that happened?
Uh, Hilariously, she had walked out of the hospital to get a good signal to call people to say, hey, the first hour was going really well. And so she came back and it was all over. It was all done. By then I was sedated. They turned off the treatment and the room was dark and I was crying.
Oh gosh. I don't know if that was a blessing for her. Maybe it was.
Yeah, I think it was a blessing because it was yeah, was not pretty.
And what has been your best moment?
Yeah, I've had a lot of best moments. Every time I'm in remission, that's a definite booyah. I'd say,
Okay, I can't remember the last time I've heard anyone say that. I love it.
I'm all about the booyah. And the best moment was last March of 2021, March 3rd, where I got to ring the bell at Mayo.
Oh, wow, that's
And I wasn't going to
great.
ring it. I wasn't going to ring it. And they're like, why? And I'm like, because there's all these patients that are around that some might not get to ring the bell. And she goes, Bill, you're ringing the bell for us, the staff. We want to hear it. And by the way, that bell will give them hope,
It
the
does.
ones that are in the rooms. And I'm like, okay. And I did. And it was magical.
Yeah, you're gonna make me cry because yeah, it gives people hope
Mm,
because a lot of people don't get to ring that bell.
yeah.
So yeah, I'm really, really glad you did. Oh my gosh,
Thank
that's
you.
just like totally gonna make me cry. All right, Bill, what is one thing you wish you had known at the very beginning of your cancer journey? And let's go all the way back, 2002 thyroid cancer.
Yeah. Own your journey. You have to own it yourself. And that's why I wrote the book, because I want people to learn from my mistakes. But that was my big mistake. And it still may cost me my life, right? Which is, did I really need that radiation from the thyroid cancer initially? That's debatable, right? So own it and don't let your medical care team dictate it. Know it, challenge it, study it, learn it, and advocate for yourself.
Let me ask you this, just a follow up. Was surgery ever on the table? Because I know for me initially, they were just going to remove my thyroid through surgery. Radiation wasn't even on the table because of my age, because of infertility. It wasn't even an issue. But because at that point, my Graves' disease had gone on for so long, I
Mm,
had serious heart issues
mm,
and they were concerned I wouldn't survive surgery.
mm.
So after I signed, all these forms saying I would probably be infertile, I agreed to radiation. They did the radiation. So was surgery ever discussed?
Yeah, they took it out first. I had a 4.5 hour surgery to remove it before we did the radiation for the
They
thyroid.
did both.
Hmm.
They did, even though it had not metastasized.
Hmm. So, and spread.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. That was my
Wow.
big lesson.
Wow. But you
Hmm.
owned it the second time,
Hmm.
right? You
Oh
did.
yeah, I for sure. It was
Yeah.
yes, very much so. It made me angry.
And you know what? Anger can be a really good emotion to have.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I tell people because if you're angry, you're not in denial.
Mm-hmm. Great point.
Yeah. So, Bill, if you could only do one thing to improve healthcare in the US, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I would say I'd shift the focus a little bit to preventing people from getting sick versus trying to get them better. So lean on health and wellness versus how to heal people that are sick. So if you can prevent people from getting sick, then that's going to solve a lot of problems. So my point being, let's focus on what we can do to help people live a healthier, active lifestyle. What that means: smoking less, drinking less, eating less red meat, exercising, that we can make a dramatic improvement to the healthcare system with fewer people getting sick.
Okay, I'm going to dig down. I'm going to dig deep on this one. I have to because
Hmm.
I completely agree with you. But how do you get people to do that? How do you motivate people, especially like a hill that I am totally willing to die on and that I have been
Mm.
crucified for on social media multiple times is we live in an era where we can't even talk about obesity because it's
Mm,
body positivity,
mhm,
and yet obesity is linked to 13 different kinds of cancer.
mm.
So, how do we motivate people to do all the things that you just talked about? How?
Great question. So it's got to have to start with education, right? It's going to have to start. It's going to have to start young, right?
Yeah,
So we've got to weave it into the curriculum in the schools is one thing, and then when you look at what this is a great question, but when you look at what can the government do to help in addition to putting it into the curriculum? Yeah,
yeah,
you can tax cigarettes higher, right? To see if you can reduce consumption. But and then use those dollars, for cessation programs to get people smoking less. Right? It's kind of a win-win. It can go. I'm not saying taxes are the answer for everything, but cigarettes would be a logical one, right? You have big
right,
gasoline taxes to pay for new roads. Why not cigarette taxes, which are already pretty big, but make them bigger for healthcare programs to get people to stop smoking would be pretty good. But it has to start with education, because if they don't know that obesity leads to 13 different types of cancer, then maybe they don't feel the pain from being obese until they get one of those 13 types of cancer. So
right.
let's teach them that fruit and vegetables are actually good for, to help reduce colon cancer, and less red meat is good for multiple things, and on the cancer side, and being active, even if it's 30 minutes a day of just walking, what a difference
I
that
know.
makes. And so yeah, I think there's no easy answer, but it has to start with an understanding that the best way to reduce healthcare costs is to keep people healthy.
Yeah,
The ROI is dramatic.
yeah. Wow. Oh, gosh, such a good answer. I could not agree more. Bill, are you ready for the Thriver rapid fire questions?
Oh, I am very ready.
I feel like you're very prepared. So,
I am.
okay, here we go. Beach, desert, or mountains?
Beach. I live right by one. So it's 7 miles to one of the most beautiful beaches in the world. So definitely a beach.
Beach Boys, Beatles, or Rolling
It's
Stones?
got to be the Beach Boys.
Oh, me too. I
Yeah.
love the Beach Boys. What is one word that best describes you?
Passionate.
And before you die, what is the last song you want to hear?
Dancing Queen by ABBA, because that's what I love to dance with my kids in the kitchen.
Oh my gosh, I adore you because I tell people like I have like sort of the playlist for my funeral,
Mm.
and people make fun of me because ABBA's on the playlist. I'm like, what is wrong with ABBA? ABBA
Oh.
is fantastic.
Oh,
Okay.
if you're not moving, listening to ABBA, if you're not happy listening to ABBA, oh,
I
the
know, what
best.
is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? They get a bad rap. They really do. All right. What is the last meal you want to eat?
Chick-fil-A.
Really?
Oh my gosh, it's so good. I love it so much.
Best fries ever.
Those waffle fries are the best. The
Yes.
grilled chicken sandwich. Oh, so good. Matter of fact, I might have to have that for lunch today.
All right. What about the last person or people you want to see?
Yeah, it'll be my wife and my three kids. And we'll be all together.
And the last words you will speak.
Thanks. I mean, thanks for the great run. Couldn't have had such a great life without them. And so, yeah, thanks.
Aw. And aside from Cancer U, what's one resource you would recommend for cancer patients and caregivers? And please tell people how they can get in touch with you and find your book.
Yeah, so clearly the book, and I wrote the book for a real reason, which is to turn, as you said at the beginning, turn my pain into purpose, but it's the truth. It was really hard to write. So you're like, it's a triggering moment every time I sat down to write this book to try to relive what I learned as I went through the journey. So highly recommend, my book, because it will make a difference, and it will take you through the very beginning to the very end of the journey, and also kind of some bonus things at the end. I call it the lagniappe, which is a French Cajun word for bonus, something unexpected that I've kind of learned through my experiences. So clearly, that for my particular cancer, the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society has been fantastic. Lean in on your healthcare providers. MD Anderson and Mayo both have been great about teaching me as I go through this journey.
And what is the title of the book and where can they find it?
Yeah, it's called Up for the Fight: How to Advocate for Yourself as You Battle Cancer, from a 5-time survivor. And if you're in the US, you can buy it on Amazon.com, Barnes and Noble, Target.com. If you're in other parts of the world, it's Amazon.com, everywhere else in the world, as well as independent retailers.
Okay, so I just got a peek at it. It's not even out yet. I mean, it will be by the time the podcast goes out, but it's not. It's pre-order, right?
Yeah, it's pre-order now. I have been giving the book to some of my friends that have been going through the cancer battle, and I needed that because it gave me some confirmation that it's going to make a difference, because it is, and it will.
Beautiful cover, by the way. The cover matters more than people realize. Gorgeous. I love
Well,
it.
and the name is authentic. The name came. I basically had an emotional breakdown September 17th, 2020, when I came out of surgery for lymphoma number 5 at Mayo by myself because you couldn't have guests in the recovery room. And I was crying, and the nurse Jen says, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I'm not sure I'm up for the fight." And she's like, "What?" I said, "Look, fifth time, I know what's coming. You know, I've lived a great life. I'm not sure I'm up for the fight." And that's where the name of the book came. We talked through it for an hour. The pastor came in and we worked through all that, and I was up for the fight. But one of the great benefits of that conversation was at the end, the pastor said, "You should write a book about this." And I said, "Okay, I will." And so I did. And so trying to make a difference.
Oh, Bill. Well, thank you so much. We will put the links to that in the show notes and in the workshop notes. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Well, thank you. And thanks for what you're doing.